Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep today, and this one's pretty, well, let's just say it's a little heavy. Hiring practices, that whole thing of getting a job.
Yeah, hiring. It can be a real maze sometimes.
Right, and we've got two sources for this deep dive. A CNBC video, the Department of Justice is going after Facebook, and then this excerpt really gets into the challenges that Black professionals face trying to, land a job.
Wow. So we're going from the legal side of things with Facebook to the actual lived experiences, of people trying to get hired.
Yeah, exactly. Like two sides of the same coin, maybe.
Yeah.
But okay, so the Facebook thing, this video, it's wild. The DOJ is saying Facebook basically said U.S. workers, no thanks, for something like 2,600 jobs.
Seriously, 2,600.
Over 2,600. And they supposedly favored people with H-1B visas.
Right, H-1B visas. Just for folks listening who might not be totally up on that, and it's basically a visa that lets U.S. companies hire people from other countries.
Right, and it's usually for jobs that, require very specific skills, right?
Yeah, tech jobs, engineering, that kind of thing. And companies, they often say they use these visas because they can't find Americans who have the right skills.
But the DOJ, they're saying that Facebook, they weren't just filling in gaps. They were, deliberately choosing H-1B visa holders over qualified U.S. workers. And it gets worse. They want Facebook to pay back all those U.S. workers who, they say got passed over.
Wow. It really makes you think, why would a company do that on such a large scale, I mean, sure, sometimes maybe it truly is about finding the absolute best person for the job, wherever they're from, but is it always that simple? You have to wonder if things like saving money play a role. Sometimes people coming in on those visas, they might be willing to work for less, or maybe there are differences in benefits costs.
It's a good point. Are companies always putting American workers first? Or are there, some hidden agendas? This lawsuit, it really makes you think about that.
Definitely. It brings up the whole idea of fairness, Does everyone have a fair chance in this hiring game?
And speaking of fairness, that's a perfect segue to our second source, this excerpt about Black professionals. And honestly, it's pretty disheartening. They talk about how Black professionals, even when they're super accomplished, they constantly get hit with this overqualified label.
Overqualified. But isn't that a good thing? I mean, shouldn't more experience be better?
You would think, right?
What?
But this source, they argue that sometimes that overqualified label, it's actually a red flag. Maybe there's some underlying bias going on.
Oh, interesting. Maybe the company's not really comfortable with someone who, I don't know, might shake things up a bit.
Exactly. What if overqualified is just an excuse, to not hire someone for some other reason?
That's a really unsettling thought. And it makes you wonder, how often does that happen?
Right. And this excerpt, they give this example of a Black technology executive. This guy was a C-suite level candidate. And according to the company's own algorithms, he was a 99.4% match for the job.
99.4%. That's practically perfect.
Right, but he still got the short end of the stick. They didn't treat him fairly. And it makes you realize, maybe even with all those fancy algorithms and stuff, bias can still sneak in.
Absolutely. It's what does it even take to be considered qualified if a near perfect match isn't enough?
And it's not just one story. This source, it's a pattern. Imagine being a Black professional and you're going through this over and over, applying for jobs, nailing interviews, and still getting rejected.
Yeah, it would be crushing. How do you stay motivated? And it's got to be a financial hit too,
Absolutely. And there's this other idea they bring up. It's called data skewing. Basically, if this kind of discrimination in hiring is happening all the time, then the data we have about Black professionals, it could be totally off.
Data skewing, we might not even be getting an accurate picture of how many Black professionals there are in different fields or how successful they are.
Exactly. Because if they're constantly being shut out of opportunities, then, the data is going to be skewed. It's a whole mess.
It is. It really is.
So, okay, we've talked about potential bias against U.S. workers, and then we talked about the challenges faced by Black professionals. I mean, where do we even go from here? What needs to change?
I think it has to start with acknowledging that bias exists, and then we need action, not just talk. We need real changes.
What kind of changes?
Well, they talk about things like blind recruitment. Basically, you take out anything that could identify the applicant, like their name or their race, so that the hiring manager is just looking at their skills and experience.
That's interesting.
And training. You need to train hiring managers to recognize their own biases, Help them understand how bias can creep in even when they don't realize it.
Yeah, awareness is huge.
Absolutely. And then companies need to set clear goals for diversity. Like, we want our workforce to reflect the community we serve, and then they need to be held accountable, make sure they're actually meeting those goals.
So much to think about.
It is. We covered a lot today, and it's heavy stuff. This whole idea of bias in hiring, it's a problem, and it affects real people's lives.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here.
It is. And, as you keep learning about all this, I want you to think about something. Technology, it's changing everything, right? Including how companies hire people. So think about this. Could AI, could all this technology, could it actually help make hiring more fair? Or could it make things worse?
That's a great question to leave everyone with. Something to ponder, as we wrap up our deep dive today. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.